Welcome to the Diagnostics Investors Panel. This is a very select kind of topic. As we all know, not everybody's interested in this area, so we're glad that you could be here. We have a few questions set out for the panel here, but we're really hoping to turn this into an interactive experience, so be thinking of the types of things you'd like to ask the panel, and we'll get to those questions hopefully fairly quickly. But the first thing that I'd like to do is go through the panel and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves and the outfit that they're working for, and maybe just very briefly their particular interests in the area. So I'll start with myself. I'm Rick Jones. I'm a partner at BioAdvance, which is an evergreen early stage life science fund located outside of Philadelphia. We're focused in the mid-Atlantic region, really between New York and Washington, D.C. We do early stage investing, seed, Series A, and we'll look at anything in the life science arena, including diagnostics and research tools.
My name is Alexis Chi. I'm a partner at Illumina Ventures. So Illumina Ventures was set up as an independent venture fund 2.5 years ago. So we carry the name Illumina because the corporate Illumina is one of our biggest investors. But we run independently as a financial VC. So our fund size is 230 million. So we invest in early stage companies, typically Series A and Series B. So we focus on 3 areas: life science tools, diagnostics, and therapeutics platforms. So typically we invest maybe 2 to 8 million in the beginning, continue to support the company, hopefully to deploy about 15 million per company during the life cycle of investment. So far we've made 11 investments, another 2 coming. So we are based in San Francisco Bay Area, but we go to other areas of the country quite frequently.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nat Brown. I'm a partner at both Vital Venture Capital and VC23, both venture groups. One of my partners in VC23, Chris Gaxetter's here as well. And both at Vital and at VC23, we're investing in biotech diagnostic platforms and research tools and other generally non-therapy biotech opportunities. We're a seed round player, although we often follow on for A and B and later rounds. We typically invest $500,000 to $1 million in the first seed round and then follow on with investments. We'll build up a portfolio of up to $5 million in each company. At Vital, we invested in 22 companies, and that portfolio is largely being harvested. We've had 11 exits, 11 to go. And VC23 is relatively new. We've just done our second investment, and we typically look to do 3 to 4 new companies each year.
Good morning. My name is Babette Güldenpfennig. I'm working for the Global Business Development Department at the Roche Diagnostics out of Basel. I'm heading in particular the transactional, the licensing and partnering activities for the whole division. Not myself, I mean my team and I. And we are interested, so from the business development perspective, diagnostics as the largest #1 IVD player in the world, we are interested in basically everything: instruments, biomarkers, lots recently in digital over the last, I would say, 18 months. The push into the digital field for decision support of physicians is very high. So we have our partnering website, Roche Partnering. There is a particular section for diagnostics. It lists all the needs and wants, has contact information as well. So you can send it, the opportunities through the partnering page, or you can send it directly to me and I forward it to experts for validation. One consideration, the requirement that it fits on our platforms is quite strong. So we have 80,000 installed bases worldwide, globally. We are not a distributor for ELISA tests or individual small tests, so it has to fit whatever the business idea is. It has to run on the installed, has to have the capability to be developed on our installed base.
Great, thanks. So this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but let's sort of start at the end of the investment spectrum, which is the exit side. We have two very large company kind of potential exits for Little Diagnostics. How much of what you eventually sell these days is actually licensed from the outside versus internally developed these days?
It's interesting when you look at the portfolio of Roche Diagnostics. I would say more than 95% of the originator idea came from outside. We are not a biomarker discovery company, and so we rely on external sources, be it academia, startup companies, for the biomarkers. If you look at our instrument, lots of them, what Roche Diagnostics is today, has been acquired. Ventana for the tissue, for the pathology application, Boehringer Mannheim for the serum work area in the 90s of last century. The Alexis, the detection technology on the Cobas instrument was in-licensed from IGEN. So PCR, you probably know all the stories about PCR, which was acquired from Citus Corporation also last century. So Roche Diagnostics is world leader in developing instruments, world-class instruments, hardware, developing the biomarkers to run on these instruments. But we are not, diagnostics. I'm not talking about our pharma division, but we are not at research, as we don't have strong research. That said, we have research, incremental, but we heavily rely on external innovation.
And how about Illumina? I know you're not on the in-licensing side, but you play a strategic role at Illumina, and how important is that too?
That's the education we have to continue to give to our clients. So we're actually not corporate, so we are totally separate. So, but Illumina itself has a business development team, and they may do strategic deals. But prior, my founding partner Nick McClary previously was at Illumina doing corporate investment. So. Within 6 years, so they invested 120 million in 17 companies and had 7 exits. And those were almost not strategic, most were just independent, really early stage startups. So that included, like, for example, Ariosa, that was bought by Roche later on for more than 600 million. Like a decode genomics, so that was bought by Amgen, and some other investments. So I think probably different corporates really have different view. But now that we are separate as an independent venture fund, so Illumina in the future will no longer invest in early stage startups like they did before, but they more focus on strategic investment.
Great, so that's pretty, I think there's room for optimism for people developing diagnostics and tools, that there are these giant corporate potential strategic partners waiting and looking out for this type of stuff. And yet we all know that investing in diagnostics or finding investors willing to invest in diagnostics is not straightforward. So maybe not. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the VC environment or the investor environment for diagnostics and what you see the particular dynamics are. not only in terms of companies you see coming to you, but you also, of course, have to find follow-on investors to join you going forward.
Sure. Yeah, well, as you probably all know, I mean, I think it's harder to raise money for a diagnostic company than for many other types of companies. There's just a lot of investors that don't play in the field. For the larger VCs that do a lot of therapeutics, diagnostics is not quite as sexy. But we've played there consistently, I think, because there's a lack of capital. But I think there are a lot of groups that have done diagnostics. So I think it's important when you're looking for capital to focus on the portfolio of the funders that you're talking to. Make sure they have done actual diagnostic investments, and then try to divide them between diagnostic platform investors and diagnostic test investors. Because some firms will do a lot of investing in particular diagnostic tests, biomarker-based tests, and others are more focused on platform technologies. That happens to be more of our focus. More on like a hardware platform where you can have many different diagnostic tests to be developed on that platform. Those are the main issues I see out there.
Great. Maybe we could start with Alexis, and if you could describe sort of what's the ideal kind of package coming into you that would interest you as far as making investments.
Yeah. So in diagnostics, well, we all know that there are a lot of challenges, particularly for diagnostics. So there are several reasons. One, like a biomarker panels is very difficult to protect. Some other people could easily develop a similar panel, right, get around your IP. And another, really, to make a test commercialized, you have to go through the regulatory hurdle to get FDA approved or develop a clear test. And you have to get reimbursement from insurers or directly from hospitals. And then you have to get buy-in from physicians to really use your test. So all of these really are great hurdles for a test to start to be developed from the beginning to be able to sell and get revenue. So because of that, I think in our investment, so we're more focused on special technology that just protect you and prevent other people from really copying you very easily. So for that, so we typically focus on special technology, for example, methylation detection. So I have a special method to have a very high sensitivity detection of methylation. So I have an IP to protect myself, so really nobody else could easily copy. So that's the angle we come in. I think that also at current age, because next generation sequencing, genomics is really enabling a lot of applications. So that's another angle why I guess our fund is particularly really focused on one area, that's genomics, whether next generation sequencing really enables very high throughput, fast, cheap kind of a test that really were not able to do before. So I guess those are the angles where we come in. So we made 2 diagnostics investments in the last 2.5 years. One is called Ceramine. That's a company that's really detect antibodies in your blood. Really digital serology company to by interrogating the antibody in your blood to find out what kind of disease you have exposed to. So that's a special angle using next generation readout, for antigen mimics that bind to antibodies. Another company that we invested in is Diagnostics, actually based in the East Coast. So that's a company that's really trying to do early stage detection of Barrett esophagus. So those are very early stage company, but they've already done tremendous amount of tests and really demonstrated that they can do diagnostics. So yeah, those are things that we find a special technology and they've already done proof of concept by looking at more than 100 to 300 samples, and they almost at the stage where they can sell their test. So yeah, that's our angle.
That's a question.
I think, you know, our interest is also in IP protected technologies, platforms, you know, hardware and/or chemistry, as opposed to biomarker focused, for the same reason. You know, I think if there's a technology that has the potential to be used for a variety of diagnostic tests, it's you know, much more potentially valuable from our perspective.
And I know you're not investing, but in terms of the ideal stage of development for something that Roche might be interested in bringing in, what would that be?
Yeah. So on the biomarker side, what we usually would like to see is validated clinical data. Ideally, 2 independent cohorts. I know this is a challenge in the current funding environment for diagnostic companies because it needs money to run these clinical studies. But you know, when there's no clinical, when we don't have clinical data, our business areas will probably tell you it's too early, and they keep monitoring. That's on the biomarker side. On the instrument side, we look at every new platform technology, very similar to what Alexa said. Of course, there are additional consideration. It has to ideally fit into the workflow to our our automated systems. Or it has to address special needs which we weren't able to detect or analyze so far. And also there we need to see proof of concept data. It can't be too early for our teams to really have a deeper dive into the technology and then to partner or to in-license for further development.
So one thing that I hear is that the things that, at least on the platform technology side, that are appealing are, it sounds like generally pretty technologically complex and IP protected and so on. What about the move towards sort of, well, let's say point of care testing versus centralized lab? And how important is that in each of your assessments? Is that something that's big that you're trying to take advantage of, or is it something that for whatever reason you think is not as important?
I think each area has their own challenge for point of care tests, so we've looked at a lot of companies in that space. But if you're really trying to figure out one company that really has been successful, we couldn't find one. So I think probably really the economic environment and also how people really perceive point of care really has made investment in that space very challenging. So a lot of the traditional tests that have been central lab-based tests, I guess that's really where Roche really play a significant role. So when we view, I guess, the hospital or the medical situations, so we have to consider really for a new company, new technology, what's the easiest way of capture market share, or really, so we have to consider the big economic environment, whether hospitals would be willing to prescribe such tests. So, but we do see a lot of point of care tests really coming up. So people are trying to develop influenza, for example, influenza-based test, $10 you can do at home or at clinics, even really organize a consortium of doctors that can really give you integrated services, do the test in their office, and refer you to some kind of a blood testing center, things like that. So we do see a lot of opportunities coming up, but we have been pretty cautious making investment in that area.
I think this is a big topic, and it's going to stay a big topic for quite a while, because point of care and the wave toward that could certainly be like a 10 or 20 year trend that we're just at the very beginning of. So it's definitely of interest to us. You know, I mean, personally, you all probably have experienced some of it. I mean, I know a couple of years ago, I was at the doctor, I thought I had the flu. They did a test right then and there, and confirmed I had it, and I got the, you know, the antiviral drug right away. Didn't get in the first 48 hours. And I felt deathly ill for 5 days instead of 8. Still a horrible experience. But you know, I think there's going to be more and more of that, and it can really change the diagnostic world and open up much bigger markets for diagnostics. So that's exciting to us. I think though, like Alexis said, right now it would be really scary to invest in a play that's completely point of care oriented. But you know, like the last diagnostic company we invested in, their play is for hospitals and labs, but it certainly it's got the size and the cost per test and the cost per instrument that it can be point of care. So that was like, oh, well, that's all just beneficial if the world starts heading toward point of care. So it's a definitely huge plus. We don't sort of factor in value for it because it's a little, you know, it's a little too blue sky right now, but it's a plus. So I think if you've got a company that has point of care potential, I would definitely sell it as the sort of the sizzle. But I think a lot of investors will be focused on, all right, you know, how do you get to market? We've talked about, you know, convincing providers to use it. Do you have a strategic partner? Are you going to partner with other labs? I mean, the whole sort of getting to market, the traditional markets, I think is so much more important to us because that can, you know, that'll be make or break whether you live or die versus, you know, do you get a $50 million exit or 300 or 500 or, you know, much bigger.
Oh, I should probably correct myself. So when you look at point of care, or maybe consumer-based test is another area. For example, previously Illumina invested in 23andMe, right? So they are the early, really frontier that really invest like doing internet testing for consumers, really at $99. So they had like several million customers all together with Ancestry and other companies. So I think that I would consider them successful. I think consumer-based genetic test is a big trend, and also microbiome-based consumer testing is going to become big. But really, how quickly they can really get into the consumers' homes, so we don't know. But I think genetic test and microbiome test will be something that we'll be watching. I think they are coming.
And is Roche thinking at all about point of care?
Roche is thinking a lot about point of care. And actually acquiring companies like 2 years ago, Lead in the point of care market for infectious diseases. You know, I agree with both of you, Alexis and Nat. We see the future of diagnostics changing a lot, will change towards patient-centric testing, also for healthcare, for the overall healthcare costs. So near patient testing and point of care testing, we differentiate between the two of them. Point of care we see more in doctors' offices, emergency rooms, whereas near patient testing is, you know, on the diabetes, you know, what patients can do at home. So point of care will play a very significant role in the future, and does already. And I agree with Alexis, we're looking at lots of point of care instruments, in particular on the cardiac field. You know, kind of get troponin, high-sensitive troponin or NT-proBNP on a point-of-care instrument, and there is just not the technology out there which is comparable and can correlate with our big centralized tests, so that the outcome of the tests from the centralized laboratories. But we keep looking, we keep work on it, definitely of interest. We have whole point-of-care life cycle teams for various technologies in diseases, and it's a challenge technology-wise. But we definitely see this as the future of diagnostics, and it will become more and more important.
Great, so maybe we should take a little pause and see already if there are any questions in the audience. Richard?
I run Mathematical Angels, and we invest in early stage companies, and we see a lot of diagnostics. And I kind of think of diagnostics a little bit like, you know, a family member who's a convict. You know, you love them, but you really worry about them a lot. And I mean, I have numerous worries in the diagnostic area. I just want to ask you about one of them because I want your impression of it. You know, we see a lot of stuff that people say, well, we have this great new technology to measure an incredibly small amount of something. And the natural question always is, well, so what are you going to measure? Because the measurement is useless without what you're going to measure. But every kind of one of these technologies seems like there are just 20 other versions of this technology, because this is not a drug where you can target a mechanism. There are so many incredibly clever ways to measure very small amounts of stuff or measure things very intelligently that everyone who does it seems like there are 6 other companies that can also do it. And so it becomes very difficult to say, well, they're going to actually get market share because someone else is working in a garage with, you know, another way of doing the same thing. How do you think about that? Or is that a problem that's also a problem for you? And if it is, how do you think about it?
I mean, I'll start. I think you're right. It's really hard to tell the wheat from the chaff. But we sort of look at, so first of all, is it very isolated? I mean, there are people focused on something that can test one thing and one thing only, or can test many things. But even for whether it's one or a broad platform, I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that on the surface look good, but when it gets right down to it, you know, can they do a big trial? Will their sensitivity and specificity be high enough in a big trial? You know, there's lots and lots of diagnostics with good sensitivity, good specificity, but just not good enough. And, you know, understanding what's out there now and what it would take for the practicing physicians or, you know, hospitals, you know, whatever buyer you're talking about ultimately, you know, decider of, hey, I need this test. You know, does it really improve the standard of care and the course of treatment? Or is it going to be interesting, but I won't change treatment on that because it doesn't have good enough numbers?
But is that a function of the biomarker or the technology to measure the biomarker?
It can be both or either, you know. And then I've even seen some that do look like they have really good numbers, but they've got no way to actually get to the community. You know, it's either too much time, too much money, just really hard to coalesce a change in opinion in the practitioners. So all those issues, I think, come into play for us.
And I would completely agree with you, because one of the reasons that we decline opportunities often is lack of differentiation. Like you said, often there are 10 or 20 other technologies that are similar to this one. So that's why we often trying to find out, yeah, how differentiated are you? Or are you like 10 times better than others, or just 2 times better? So yeah, sometimes it's kind of difficult to judge, but I think for investment, I guess probably technology is one thing, execution, team, and the financial backup, those are all together are very important, because a lot of I think diagnostics company die not because they are not good, because their execution is weak, because they don't have enough money to support the company to have that long runway. If you really look at Guardant Health, maybe there are 20 other companies who will claim, right, I have another genomics kind of analysis method that can really do like a 0.01% detection of mutation. But why can they succeed and really becomes really the leader test for liquid biopsy diagnosis from physicians? It's because they have a strong team and really executed really well. They have a very good reputation among physicians. And they have support from Sequoia and others with a lot of money. So I think, especially from investor perspective, we want to find a team that's really good and really experienced. That's the maybe number one thing. And really we try to find a number of other investors and really come in together with us so that we really can support the company in the long run. So I think in investments in diagnostics, those are two elements that has to be considered.
It's more like a software investment in a way. Where,
But to be honest, so we never invest in software alone
but
company.
it has a similar pattern and model. You want to have a strong consortium, you want to have strong execution. It's not about the science just, it's about the market penetration as well.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Could you comment on the importance of IP? Obviously, I guess it's more applicable to biomarker space, right? So it's difficult to file in the United States. Do you have any position in terms of what markets you prefer? What countries would you like to see the IP protection in?
Yeah, maybe I take this. Yeah, the US is challenging a biomarker patenting. That said, Europe is still possible, China as well. So as a global company, we are aware of the challenges in the US. But it's, we also look at the rest of the world. That said, and it's coming back to the other question, we again, clinical utility is absolutely of key to us. We see a lot of maybe even more than the IP protection. We see a lot of opportunities coming our way where it's 15 patients and it looks good, but can it be upheld in a larger study? And that's all next to the indication. We focus on signature diseases which will become relevant. We've done a large market analysis, which are the diseases which will play a major role in diagnostics in the next 15 years. And we've even broken it down to not the disease, but to the application. So is it stage 2 to stage 3 in pancreatic cancer, or is it stage 1 to stage 2? So we have a pretty good view on where is the market, where are the high volumes for our instruments, for the platforms. And for that, we'd like to see clinical utility data, convincing data. And IP is important, but there are not so many diagnostic companies out there who can develop and have the market power and the commercial reach to really be successful with the tests. I'm not saying it's not important, but there are other factors for companies like Roche, which plays in their favor to get the market share on the assays. And it's interesting, we had a visit yesterday at the Boston Children's Hospital, and we had a kind of educational sessions there because the business model in diagnostic is not really known compared to pharma. And the audience was really surprised when they saw how long it takes to get even with good clinical validation data, to develop a test, to get it in the guidelines, and to get the market adoption. We're talking about 15 to 20 years, even for a company like Roche, on an established platform. So it's often underestimated how important it is, to your point, to get it in the guidelines, to get it adopted by the markets, by the physician, and to get the reimbursement questions sorted out.
How about IP for more research tools, platform technologies? What sort of territories do you look for?
We kind of invest in the US, but also Europe, and we also look at opportunities in China. So I would say IP protection in all those areas are very important. So we invested in a company in France and looking at another one. I would say in some of the countries, like IP is one thing. For example, in China, diagnostics is really hot. When you look at some of the early stage companies, so they could be valued at 300 to 500 million US dollars just after a couple of years with minimum revenue. I think if you have IP protection, great, but that doesn't guarantee you to become the market leader, especially in that environment. So execution, and whether you have a marketing channel, and whether you have aggressive team that really sell your test, whether you are willing to spend a lot of dollars behind the marketing and sales, really are some of the key really to help you to be successful. I think each country are different, but I'm kind of a bullish in the diagnostic space in China. There are a lot of opportunities because in China there is a opportunity for a patient to pay out of pocket, so which is never going to happen in the US. So I think people are willing to spend, like, let's say, several hundred US dollars to do a test, or even $1,000 to do a cancer testing if it cannot get reimbursement from insurance. So I think, but you have to collaborate with a local, I guess, marketing channel and to really get your test on the market. So, but if you have opportunities, I would encourage you to look at that market and see whether you can find some partner to work together in that area.
Yes.
Yeah, I often hear from VCs that one of the reasons they don't, well, that one of the things they hear most often from companies looking to, diagnostic companies that are building, is that they underestimate how much money they're going to need to commercialize these things. That they say, oh, I can do this for $20 million in X number of years, and they say, no, it's going to be $100 million. You know, you hear that a lot. And you also hear that they don't want to invest because the multiples of exit are too low, or they've been burned on diagnostics before. I'm wondering if you can speak to each of those points and, you know, what advice you give companies that are putting together a business plan as they focus on this, because you mentioned very early in the talk, you know, regulation and reimbursement and resistance among the physician community, and those are big things. But, you know, getting that right level of funding and knowing you're going to have an exit on the other side that is a multiple that's attractive to VCs is something I'd like to hear you speak to.
I would say those are very true. That's the reasons that really deter a lot of firms from investing in the diagnostics area. So when you look at Exact Science, which is really several $billion company, but before they got into before they got IPO, so several hundred million already went into that company, right? So you're looking at a 15 years of time frame of before a test really get reimbursed. So those are particular challenges. That's why we're always thinking, can you have a smart way of just using a little bit of dollars just to prove that your test is really valuable? And the IRR for diagnostics investment is typically low because you invest that many dollars, but it has to be 7 to 8 years at least to get some kind of exit. That's why some people say, maybe only the last stage, like Series C or D investor can get some meaningful, like let's say 3 times of return for their dollars before there is an exit opportunity. So, but that's often the case, yeah. So that's why we always think whether there is a cost-efficient way of really validating your test. That was the case for us to invest in diagnostics. So just with, let's say less than $3 million or so to do a test on 300 samples, get some kind of validation. And maybe companies like Medtronic or others will be interested in buying. So those are the angles that we look at. But I totally agree with you that those are really the biggest challenges even for investors to look at the diagnostics company.
I would totally agree. I mean, the issues you raise are key, and we see so many diagnostic companies that underestimate the time and money it takes to get into the market. They might have a great test, but you know, the medical community is, I mean, there's a lot of new things that they get thrown their way, and they're very, very reluctant to change. It has to be a big leap forward. The high confidence has to be built. And this can just take a lot of money. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to throw the money at it because there's no return. So I would suggest there's sort of two basic ways to go, just to skin the cat. It's the rare thing that with money is going to get you to success in marketing it yourself. You know, you might be that, but you know, think really long and hard about the fact that you're probably not going to do it on your own. So then there's really two game plans. One is to get a strategic partner early, maybe a strategic partner investor. Another is to sell early to a strategic who can take it the rest of the way. But you know, both have their challenges for sure. And a lot of people are afraid, you know, if I get involved with a strategic investor partner really early, they'll take advantage of me and blah, 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 and there's all these risks. But we've seen, by and large, it pay off in spades. First of all, they validate things for other investors, so you can get the rest of the money. But most importantly, you know, distribution and brand. You know, we had a company called CD Diagnostics down in the Philadelphia area. Partnered, it's a synovial fluid joint diagnostics company. We got Zimmer as an early investor and strategic partner. And they took the first test, blew it out to the market. It became the new gold standard. And I mean, suddenly, which was 2 or 3 years instead of 15, you know, but 2 or 3 years of really hard work still. And you know, it's not easy to get big companies to, they have a lot of things they have to do too. So you know, there's a whole effort there, but you know, it was a great success in the market for the product, and they ended up buying the company for a nice price. It worked out for everybody, and this company would never have gotten there on their own.
I kind of agree with you, Ned. We see this, it worries us, what's happening on the investment side in diagnostics, of course, as a company which relies on external innovation, seeing the venture investment going down for startup companies, is concerning. So we recently, the last year, the Global Business Development Department, we're designing, exactly to your point, what can we do to guide these companies to take maybe a smarter route in development, in designing the clinical trial, in having access to the market. So this will be a program which is about to start next year. So we're thinking on lots of creative ways how to, since global business development, I mean, the business can't invest, it's the venture fund in diagnostic, which invests in companies, and they are financially driven, so it's not a strategic fund. So we have to find other ways to support companies from the business, and I think in particular in diagnostics, where the business model is not so known compared to the pharma business model, it is important that the early companies, the young companies get guidance on how it works. It's a low margin compared to pharma, and we see it with our pharma colleagues, it's a low margin business. You need high volumes, you need reimbursement to make it to the market and to be profitable at the end, and that's a challenge.
Great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for your attention, and welcome you to come up and introduce yourselves after the panel here. So have a great conference.